It is my real big pleasure to introduce Professor Ervin Laszlo, President of Club of Budapest, Hungarian philosopher of science, systems and integral theorist, the founder of systems philosophy and developer of the ISCA paradigm, the new conception of cosmos, life and consciousness emerging at the forefront of the contemporary sciences. And he is the recipient of highest degree in philosophy and human sciences from Sorbonne. He has been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He has authored more than 70 books, which have been translated into 20 languages, and has published in excess of 400 articles and research papers, including 6 volumes of piano recordings. Please welcome Professor Ervin.
Thank you for this wonderful introduction. It's always very good to know how I'm defined, because I don't know who I am. Really, to get a definition, I don't know. I'm trying to find out what there is, and what there is so importantly centered on consciousness and on values and the relationships. And what you're doing is so close to that. So that I'm just trying to talk off the cuff a little bit about things that I hope will be of interest to you, and then I'll see if we can have a dialogue on that. Please disregard the title that was given. I gave that title originally because when I was asked by a wonderful host what title I would give, I just off the cuff I said I'll give the talk that I was going to give in the next few times in various places. First in Shanghai, and then in Toronto, and then in London. And I thought, well, okay, let's try this over here too. But those are primarily for business leaders. And and those will be interested in the world today and how we can change it. And hopefully they're interested in it, because this world needs to be changed. And so I started to give you the title. But I can always give that talk if you like, but I thought we'll talk a little bit about what it is that you are doing, because I don't know what it is that you are doing, and I'm interested to find out that you don't either.
That's the magic.
But it works. So we try to find out how it works, why it works. Now, a term I like to use is for science, I like to use the term new paradigm. That means a conception that tries to integrate the various aspects of scientific findings into a consistent whole. Einstein once said, and I'm very taken with that saying, he said, in science we try to do it verbatim. We try to bind together the observed facts in the simplest possible scheme. He said many times you have to do the simplest possible scheme, but he also said the simplest, but not more simple than is possible. So we have to look for as coherent a scheme, as embracing a scheme as possible. Science is breaking apart the coherence of the world, because the modern mentality, basically Western mentality, is to look at one thing at a time and then try to understand it, and then the rest kind of recedes into the background. If you are a specialist in hard rocks, you can't talk to a soft rock geologist because you don't have a common mentality, a common language. It's a big exaggeration, but the fact is that disciplines have been so highly specialized that it's very difficult to communicate across disciplinary boundaries. And yet, I think you understand, you experience, and that we know that nature is a whole. The universe, as we know it, the experience is a whole, is seamless. And we need to account for that. It's not compartmentalized into bits and pieces. that you hear something, that you understand that. If you understand this, probably you also understand that, because it's a whole. And you mentioned the term holographic, and that's true here. Because in a hologram, you have all the information in every part. So no matter how much you break apart this whole that we call the universe, it still remains a whole. And still, if we know one part of it, we get to know another part. But we don't recognize that the problem is we operate as if they were separate units. And you can just do this and forget the rest. It's very dangerous what is happening in politics, you know. Put one country first, and then you forget the rest. You know. And you see what's happening, it's breaking apart the system. Our cognitive conceptual system is breaking apart because it's super specializing. So now there are alternative movements trying to understand the whole universe as a coherent, unified system. Very ambitious, and if anybody within academic science will try to do that, they'll be asked by the dean to go to a school of theology as professor. Because you have to operate within a given field in science. Like, even though the experience is so total. Some months ago I was at a meeting in Prague with Stanislav Gross, transpersonal psychology, and that was also seeking the wholeness. And Stan Grof, who's a good friend, who said, this spiritual experience, or religious experience as he calls it, if that's a whole experience, the experience of the whole universe. But he said if somebody would have such an experience in the church, the priest would probably ask him to go to see a psychiatrist. So our experience is whole. Your experience, I'm sure, is whole. We are dealing with that. But we don't grasp it as such. So I think there's a big need to go and try to understand the wholeness of phenomena, the wholeness of the world in which we live. And if you operate within the academic world, or within any enclosed system where you are being consecrated as an expert in this field, you can't do that because this thing goes beyond any given field. That's why people have difficulty introducing me, and I have difficulty understanding or trying to define what I'm doing. Because, okay, so I try to understand wholeness. I try to understand how things are related together. And for that, you need to start from the bottom. It will be very difficult for you, I think, because I'm not quite sure. I've seen some constellation work, and I've been with Bert Hellinger also at a famous meeting in Würzburg, which left a great impression on me. But I still don't know exactly what you're doing and how it works. But if you try to understand what you're doing by looking at the sciences as an academic discipline, you'll find it very difficult. You won't be able to relate it to any given field, to any given principle or theory. Because what you go, it goes beyond the disciplinary boundaries. I think, and that's what I want to talk about, I think what you're doing relates to the new paradigm, because the new paradigm is a holistic paradigm. The idea is that the world operates as a whole. Now, how can you perceive that? How can you conceptualize that? Okay, so you feel that. Perhaps you don't need to conceptualize it, that's fine. Then I'm here to wish you good luck and continue with your work. But you asked me to talk about, to come here, so I think I should talk about something about how you can understand that as a whole. So I want to start with the beginning. And the beginning is the Big Bang. We can't go further back. As far as we know, before the Big Bang, the world, the cosmos, was an undifferentiated whole. We can't characterize it any other way. Also, very interestingly, most of the great religions give you some ideas of what there was before there was space and time. That it is in the Christian book of Revelations as well. It is a lot in Buddhism, a lot in Hinduism, a lot in Taoism. But you can't define what it was. It was an undifferentiated wholeness, where it was a field, you could say today, a field of potentials. And this field of potentials became partially, we don't know whether it's wholly or partially, but at least partially, actualized or realized. But you had this explosion that's what sort of jokingly it's called the Big Bang. 13.8 billion years ago, roughly, give or take a couple of million. There was this energy implosion in the universe. Don't know where the energy came from. It's generated there. And what it did was it created a separation, created individuation, particularization, if you like, in this field. Units appeared. Now, we make a big mistake when you think of these units, which we today call the quanta, as separate entities. You're looking for the Higgs boson, for example, looking for it as a particle. I don't think it's a particle. It's a particular cluster of vibration in the field. Like every particle, every atom. These are not hard little things which exist by themselves. Every single particle contains the information of all. Okay, fine. Please say so if you don't hear. Okay. It's enough not to understand, but in addition not to hear also. So think of the beginning as being a unified whole. It's a unified field. And there was nothing particular about it. No particularities. It was just a continuous field of potentials. I'm not going to go through the physics of universe creation, just to emphasize a couple of things about it. One, that it emerges out of an undifferentiated wholeness. And it's probably still a part of that field from which it emerged. It's not separate. The universe can be defined as a domain of coherence in the unified field. By coherence, you mean where the sequence of waves, of radiations, of interactions has a level of coherence. Perhaps because the waves are in phase, so these things appear as though they were things. But there are no things. There were no things, there still are no things. It's an optical illusion. The term, by the way, the thingness as an optical illusion comes from Einstein. Most big scientists, great scientists, recognize this. This emerging field has certain characteristics. And it has the characteristic of being not only unified, but structured. You see, if this energy implosion, 7.8 billion years ago, would have just acted on an undifferentiated field, it would have created a chaos consisting of minimally coherent substances, particles, plus quantum particles. These quantum particles would continue to interact in a random way. And what the world will be today is a random sea of quantum interactions. It's interesting that up to about 10 years ago, this was the mainstream view in physics. And when you go to most of the big universities, except the very top ones perhaps, this is the general view. People say the universe, well, as we know, was created by a series of random interactions. And what turned out is that it could not have created the universe as we have within 13.8 billion years ago, because the time required by statistical analysis to create anything, even like the DNA of a fruit fly, a very simple kind of organism, would take far longer than the age of the universe, since the Big Bang, to come about. Random interactions simply don't create the universe that we inhabit. Something created it which is more than random. Something reduced or biased the randomness of the interactions that came about when the universe was born. These are called laws of nature. The laws of nature, this is now good mainstream physics if you like, the laws of nature were present when the universe was born. They were not created by the universe. They act on the universe. Think of a similar, for example, you have any organized activity. I'm sure yours too, to some extent, although probably it's a very generous set of rules. But there are some very strict rules in the army, even in the church, or in, let's say, in chess or in cards. You have a set of rules, and you play the game according to those set of rules. Now, the rules are not part of the game. It's very important to recognize that. The rules guide the way you play the game. So when the universe was created, the laws that were already present were in the universe, and they guided the creation of the universe. And the universe was created along very, very spectacularly coherent ways. For example, when this thing, a quantum particle or vibration that we call a proton meets a neutron, then it can join together and form the atom, nucleus of an atom, which can accept electrons, but only certain kinds of electrons, certain specific, very highly specific energy states. And these can interact according to the laws of chemistry, physical chemistry, by balance, and they build up into structure. What I want to say is very simply, the rules that the universe follows, metaphorically example, are highly coherent, system-building rules. They create things that are coherent. As I say, they weren't like that, we will still have a set of chaotic, random interactions which do not permit any spectator, any observer to recognize anything, because they're just a sea of random interactions. But it's not the case. What strikes us about the universe, as practically all the great physicists have been struck by this, how incredibly coherent it is, how incredibly organized it is. What we are doing is destroying the organization locally here and there, but the universe itself is organized, is coherent. Every element is in interaction with every other element, and they all work together to create what you might call wholes, elements that are part of the system in which they appear. So the universe has a series of particles that interact on their own without rhyme or reason is being discarded, this concept. It's not the case. The universe builds itself according to rules, and these rules appear to be system-building rules. They create complex systems. Don't forget that this is the case, because this is the most basic inheritance that we get from the universe. This is what the religious and spiritual systems call the presence of the will of a supernatural being, a God, a Jehovah, an Allah, a Brahman, a Tao, a great spirit. It is there, all of these names that we give to this phenomenon is system building, is wholeness creating the universe in which we live. Not that this universe will still have chaotic elements. We don't know, for example, what the role is of dark energy and dark matter. And there are many elements that we can't force into coherence. But the fact that this universe is here is striking. And the most striking evidence for this is that you and I, we are here, and we ask this question. You couldn't be here asking these questions if the universe was more chaotic than it is. They're incredibly organized. Famous biophysicist, cosmologist actually called it, and into biophysics, Fred Hoyle. He said a couple of decades ago about talking how life has come about through organization of the DNA, of the genetic code. He said the probability that the genetic code of a fruit fly would come about by random interaction is similar to the probability that a hurricane blowing through a scrapyard would build a working airplane. So it's not impossible. It's not particularly likely. Another thing is, if you how much rules you need and how much time you need to create complexity, ordered complexity, is also illustrated by this fact. A calculation that shows, for example, the complexity that you create, that you order, rather than the complexity that you order, by ordering the faces of a Rubik cube, the cube of various colors, and all faces, if you want to order those, and if you were to take 1 second for each move that you take, and you don't have rules, you have randomness, you just take everything that you got. It takes 10 on the 28th power to order all the faces, so as to have a systematic, organized Rubik cube. 10 on the 28th powers is more than the age of the universe. So of course this means randomness. Randomness doesn't explain anything. What there is, and I want to impress this on you because I think that it's very relevant to what you're doing, what you're finding. The universe is a highly self-organizing, coherent, building entity. It's a quantum field with properties that apply to all elements, to all parts of this field. Nothing is exempt from it. All elements of this field interact with every other element because they're not separate. Actually, the universe is one. And that's exactly what physics is telling you today. It's exactly what the great religions have been telling you all along. And what every introspective person who meditates and who goes deeper into himself and herself will also find. The universe is one, and we perceive that oneness when we go below and beyond the everyday operations of our busy mind. Sometimes it's called the monkey mind, the monkey brain. Because you're so taken up with the everyday details of your life, of the existence around you, and forget what is underlying. When you can leave that behind, then you can still your mind, whether you use meditation, whether you do as the Buddhists do, or the Taoists, or Christian prayer. All of this is entering into a deeper level. And the deeper level is one, is a oneness. And it's very remarkable how today, when we live through perhaps the most critical period in humanity's short history, because our very existence is at stake, how this idea of oneness, coherence, belongingness is surfacing and is being recognized, is being emphasized through a behavioral characteristic that is known by the four-letter word LOVE. Love is what's coming about, and that is a recognition, that is a surfacing of the basic implication, of the basic drive of the universe. Let me just think of a glass of water. But metaphorically, you could say, we live in a self-organizing, love-filled universe. It would not be possible to be here unless this was the case. So if we find this, there's good reason for it. In my latest writings, I try to stay as close to science in terminology, in order not to be completely said, oh, it is just oof, but connected to science. So I call this wholeness creating tendency in the universe an attractor. You know what an attractor is? An attractor in systems theory, you're probably using it. In systems theory is an element as a dynamic factor in the system that makes the system tend toward a given state. What this system, we call universe, tends toward is order, coherence, wholeness, expressed through the love of one part for the other part. Now this is not how classical physicists describe the universe. But the great physicists do describe it like that. And I think anybody who goes deep below the surface will find that this is the case. Let me add one other element to this, then I think we should pursue this by dialogue, or multi-lobe, if you like. In order to reach that, it's already implied in what I'm saying, you have to go to a deep level. Now, this deep level is both in your psyche, as a subconscious, as the original field of consciousness, and in the cosmos, in the universe as such. Quantum physics today, and this is clearest in the work of David Bohm, but it's there, all along. Quantum physics today distinguishes two levels. There could be more levels, but two levels certainly clear. And one is what Bohm calls the explicate order, and the other one is the implicate order. Now Bohm needs this implicate order because he can't explain the behavior of things in the explicate order otherwise. You need rules, you need drivers, you need attractors, you need love. Otherwise the universe, as it operates, that has no explanation. So, what I want to say is, I'll come to this conclusion, but I'm not alone, is that the rules that build the universe are not in the universe. They are beyond, or below the universe, if you like. The universe appears as a phenomenon of progressive, coherent building in a field, and the field itself has all these tendencies. The field is a highly implied, inclination-bound, very difficult to find language for this, an inclination-bound field, an attractor field, a field that attracts toward building coherence, toward building structure. Otherwise you wouldn't have atoms, you wouldn't have molecules, you wouldn't have cells, you wouldn't have life, you wouldn't have galaxies, you wouldn't have the universe. It's built like that. So it's in a separate level. So don't look for it on the everyday level. These deeper elements are there when you yourself approach the phenomenon that you deal with by going to a deeper level. Meditate, go prayer, whatever. Go deeper. And that you get closer to the, what Bohm calls the implicate order. What Plato called also the level of the soul and the form, what Plotinus called the oneness, already 2,500 years ago. But Aristotle didn't quite recognize what Plato did. And we know that everything, what he calls also the level of the soul is not on the surface level, the soul is on the deep level. And all that we are fundamentally is a manifestation of the deep level on the surface, on the explicate order. Okay? This is nowadays is good physics. It amplifies what physicists say into a paradigm. But if you want to understand the world, we need to take this as a whole, amplify it so that we can understand what's happening. We don't understand our deepest inclinations, our deepest motivations, simply by reducing it to biochemical or biophysical interactions on our brain. We don't understand anything that's going on around us simply by thinking that these are interactions between physical or physical-chemical structures. There is something guiding it. And here is where the new physics, quantum physics, moves close to spirituality, to the point where there is hardly any difference between the insights of the great spiritual masters and the insights of the great physicists. Only have to recognize this, because each has a tendency to protect his or her own territories and say, this is what I know, this is my language, and I don't know the other one, and maybe I'm not too eager to use the other language. But if you look at it from an objective, so-called objective viewpoint, then you have to recognize that underneath the separate languages, there is a common recognition. And I use the English term recognition. I like that because I write it with a hyphen. Recognition. This has been cognized thousands of years ago. It's been forgotten in the modern age because science, as I mentioned earlier, was separated of studying one thing at a time, one type of phenomenon at a time. So we don't really see the common elements. We don't really see the basics, what's underlying all this. It's a wonderful story, this universe. But probably, as far as we can estimate the other universes, there may be lots of those, myriad universes. And they could all be structured differently. But this universe has these elements, these attractors, which make it what it is, which make it capable of generating life, generating mind, generating consciousness. So I think, just to deal with another major issue which would deserve a seminar of its own, obviously, but in my view, consciousness is in the deep dimension. It is expressed through our brain on the surface level, but consciousness of the universe is really there in the field, and that we just participate in that field. It's a hologram type of field, holographic field. So we dip into that. So we mustn't be surprised and try to worry about how we can explain that when we pick up, we have an element of consciousness that we deal with. How is that communicated to somebody else? Doesn't have to be sent over there. It's there already. We all have the same consciousness. It's the universal consciousness. And we all develop it and, in a sense, expropriate it for ourselves, as if it was an individual consciousness. So again, a lot of the mysteries, a lot of the puzzles can be resolved. How come that consciousness can act on matter? Very simple answer. I give this answer, but I'm not alone in giving this. Very simple, because consciousness is and matter is not. There is no such thing in this quantum field as we could reasonably call matter. Matter is all its characteristic of separateness, hardness, and endurance in time and so on. There are fluctuations. There are various levels of clusters, of frequencies that hold together sufficiently so we can recognize some as being individual entities. It doesn't mean that they are separate. It's just that they are individual because we can see them as individual. They are coherent in themselves. It's a different paradigm. I think you, with your work in consciousness, in constellation, you have it an easier time to accept this kind of conception. Most people have great difficulty because they like to hold on to something which is real. This is real. This is material. You can call this an entity, and you can name it, and you say, where is it in time and in space? These fluctuations are not in any particular part. They are everywhere because they're non-local. You can interact with them as if they were local, but essentially, and I think Maria will talk about also about remote healing, which is non-local healing. They are a part of a hologram, so they are everywhere. When you have this solved this way, I'm going about here and spending less than an hour in dissolving the whole known universe into a quantum field. But I've been working on this now maybe 20, 25 years, trying to get this conception and testing it against various theories. Quantum theories, as it comes out, is more and more the clear example of it. But psychology, especially deep psychology, depth psychology, and the search, the seeking of the deep dimensions of our mind also demonstrates how this is true. That we are operating out of a deep dimension which holds all the laws of nature, with which we interact. Because I did mention this, but before I close, I just want to mention it also. This field, which is the deep dimension, I call it the Akashic field, that this deep dimension has memory. Everything that happens in it once still is happening. Nothing completely disappears. Just as there is no absolute chance, because chance would mean that something is disconnected from other things. Nothing is disconnected from anything else. So you cannot have absolute chance. You cannot have randomness. Everything is to some extent obeying some deeper attractors. The will of God, you like, call it whatever you like. But it's there. And we live in this universe, and then we enter into a deep state, whether through prayer or meditation or introspection or art or healing or whatever. You'll come across this. Just to conclude, I just want to say, I think the greatest, most important development or movement in the contemporary scene the last few years is the emergence into prominence the interest in and the active seeking of consciousness. Consciousness as not a local phenomenon limited to one's brain. A consciousness as a cosmic phenomenon, universal phenomenon, expressed by such terms as universal love, as unconditional love. These are all cosmic consciousness relevant expressions. It means every part of this universe attracts every other part, and it is all reflected in one's mind, in our mind. So whether you're a great scientist, a great religious leader, a great artist, doesn't make any difference. You get to this, you get to this point. If you happen to go through an academic education, it takes longer. Because then you have to unlearn it. If you go directly to art, it is faster. And if you go to healing medicine, which is the great other emerging trend today, it's also based on consciousness. Because the greatest emerging movement today, I think, in healing, I may be biased in that because I think very highly of this, is what you might call spiritual healing or non-local healing. The phenomena is coming about at an amazing pace, how healing really can occur by this non-local spiritual means. And there are now even systematic ways to explore this, to work with it. Maria will be talking about something. So I am hopeful. I see tremendous challenges on the horizon based on the old mechanistic, separatist, materialistic thinking, but also tremendous movement toward recognition of the oneness, the wholeness, and the love that seems to be ruling this universe. I think we can find ways to grasp what we mean by terms such as soul, and consciousness, and health. All of these are possible within the new paradigm, without going into the old framework. The new paradigm gives you a framework for thinking. It's a realistic framework because as far as we know, the Big Bang acted on a field, the Big Bang acted on a quantum field. As far as we now know, we are part of a quantum field that's hardly articulated, but not separate. satisfied that this is going in the right direction. I know very little, and I think altogether we don't know too much about what is really happening. But if you think along the lines of the new paradigm, I think we are on the right lines. So my work these days is oriented toward handing down the research enterprise to a broader group of people. I've created the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research, first in Tuscany, now moving into Trieste, which is not far from here. And an international institute. We have our next meeting, for example, the 27th of this month together with the Scientific and Medical Network of England, which is a very prestigious organization. Serious scientists coming together to explore this. And that's sort of my heritage. I'd like to get this kind of concept, this kind of research going. So it goes way beyond what I can do. It goes into a common pool of knowledge, where we create a new science with which we can live, which gives meaning to our lives and gives direction to our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Laszlo. Can we say that when we talk about Akasha records, we're talking about the spirit mind?
I don't know what you mean by spirit mind.
Is it when we go into the spiritual field?
No.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. The Akashic dimension is, or the Hindu seer said that 3,500 years ago. It's below. It's a dimension below space, time, energy, whatever, fire, earth, and all. So it's beyond the everyday world, and that's why like Vivekananda wrote a beautiful thesis on that. That's why it's so appropriate. See, Akasha is not something special. It's the mind of God, if you like. It's the field out of which the universe was born and which keeps informing. I just have to call attention also to what Maria will talk about, the writing information with a hyphen. Because information, this is also comes from David Bohm. Information doesn't mean everyday information. It means a non-vectorial effect. It's something that acts without producing physical effects. It acts, it forms. It forms because the entire universe, the explicate, the surface, the observable universe is being constantly formed by a deeper level. And you can't find this by taking a magnetograph or taking any physical instrument. But it's there. The closest to it you get in a deep state of meditation when you can actually feel some of that. But it's not a force that's acting. It's an information. And that, I think, is one of the rediscoveries of quantum physics, of age-old beliefs. Plato would be very happy with this definition.
Does consciousness manifest itself, or we conceive it only as in levels or as in different types of consciousness? I understand that you're saying the deep consciousness of the universe is one, but do we experience it in levels or in different types of?
All these theories of consciousness, I'm not contesting them. I think there are many ways that you can develop consciousness, and many theories are applicable. What I'm saying is that whatever consciousness, however you describe it, its origins are universal and they're cosmic. The big difference between most of the ordinary psychological concepts and the deep quantum concept is that the ordinary concept of consciousness is a product of the brain. You just simply an interaction of the neurons in the brain produce something that you call consciousness. And no wonder that psychologists and philosophers say, how could this possible? How could something immaterial and non-material produce something that's material and interactive? You know, there's no good answer to it. Because it's not something material in the first place. It is something cosmic, a cosmic hologram, which we can interact with, which we can perceive. We can get a part of it, an aspect of it, appearing in our consciousness. And according to what aspect, this is almost infinitely varied and infinitely deep. According to what aspect you get a different expression of consciousness. But its origin is the same. You don't have your consciousness limited to your brain, and I have mine limited to my brain. We have the same consciousness, which we explore, access, and transform into everyday consciousness in our own particular way. So I have no quarrel with many theories of consciousness, as long as we agree that we are dealing with a cosmic phenomenon and not a local phenomenon.
You have said that consciousness of the universe is in the field. I would like to know, what is your view on scientists that keep failing at their attempt to create artificial intelligence machines that are conscious, since they keep saying that they can't really find consciousness, but they keep attempting to create artificial intelligence machines that are conscious?
I think they'll fail. To be conscious, you have to be part of the universe. You have to be there. You have to be a product of the universe, as it were. We have a history that goes back 13.8 billion years. The machine that we create has a history of a few months. And everything that has happened in the universe is in our consciousness. It's all part of it. And you are reproducing symptoms, you are reproducing surface phenomena, something that acts as if it was consciousness. But really, I don't think what we mean by participation in cosmic consciousness, for that you have to be an evolutionary element in the universe. You must have started at the beginning, and you must be an evolutionary outcome, a local concentration of cosmic consciousness. And you can't have that. Although machines can do a great deal about acting as if they were following some consciousness. But what they're doing, they're following rules, they're following algorithms, and they can be very, very sophisticated. And I think there's a real danger that to some extent they'll overtake many aspects of human life. They may even produce discord, produce unnatural directions, dangerous directions, mechanizing perhaps, making rules, the principal means. But they are not themselves conscious. They are not participating in this universe of consciousness. So I'm willing to fight IT theorists on that.
I would like to know, when you talked about the rules of the universe, are the rules within the system, or are there rules behind autopoiesis? They're within, so it's like a closed shop?
When I mentioned sort of the rules of chess, not being part of the game, but just guiding how the game is played, The laws of nature, as far as they are conceptualized, they are not subject to change by what happens in the universe. They are given. The universe operates according to these rules. You would have to have a supernatural entity to change these rules. Perhaps there are. But anything that we experience are phenomena that follow the rules, clearly or not so clearly. Obviously or not obviously. But so we need to distinguish, I think, between these different levels. The rules are something, they are the movement toward wholeness. I like to talk about a holotropic attractor. Stan Groves talks about the holotropic consciousness. It's attracted by wholeness. It moves toward wholeness. The universe is holotropic. That's perhaps using a semi-scientific sort of a term that could be easier to accept. But the rules are, if you like, the will of God. The rules are what is given to the universe. But from the time it was born to this time. This is why the universe is the way it is. It has this particular attractors. And we don't know how come. That's the big mystery. And then you enter into theology, or metaphysics at least. There's no explanation from observation into that. You can only say, these rules act as such as such. How come they are there? Okay. Ask yourself, maybe deep down you can have the answer. But we can't have it based on observation, because observation only tells you what there is, not why there is.
Is it maybe what is going on in constellation field, that we focus all, because it is mostly group work, that we focus all together very frequently in love, meaning we are all together connected in that constellation field, and in that state of togetherness of many persons have better access to Akasha with focused question, and then we can get answers.
I think it's very clear. You have the experience of groups of people who are thinking alike and creating almost one mind, the supermind, entering and then being able to find more things. This is a field that is very difficult to explore, because there are tremendous insights coming about also by individuals. So, but on the whole, I think statistically, I guess, having a group focus on the same experiences will articulate that experience more, will reach deeper down. I guess so, because it's all group work of a couple of people coming together, creating that whole, that local whole, that can interact with the rest. It's so obvious that this works. But it also works to work on one's own, getting deep down, having the great mystics, the great explorers, operate like that. So I think it's probably both.
I didn't know exclusively, just it is easier maybe for us.
Apparently it is. But as we explore, it certainly is very encouraging, very promising field to focus in on some element of consciousness or of a phenomenon and pursue that and see what effect it has. And that's what you're doing. It's a wonderful experiment. It's a laboratory.
Yeah.
One more.
I'm afraid I have two. I hope that's okay. I've been sitting with them both, but I try to be quick. So I've been following your work for some time, and I want to just check if I'm right to understand that so the manifest world, the explicate, and then the akashic and the implicate, and this seems to be an informational field that doesn't translate to the physical, but I seem to understand from some of your writing that they begin to find the mechanism in the body that could be influenced by the implicate order. Is that correct?
Again, it's difficult to break it down into specific actions or parts of the body. We are informed as a whole. We are in every particle, every cell, every quantum particle is informed by the deeper field, by the deeper dimension. And when it's the most sensitive part of our organism, which is a higher nervous system, it will demonstrate it more, perhaps, more clearly. But I think it's there in the instincts. I'm struck by the fact that, for example, we talk about instincts as though it was something up in the air, you know, it's just an instinct. An instinct is probably an information that we get, that we could bring to a level of consciousness where we can deal with it. But it's there. It's an information. So inner knowledge, you know, inborn knowledge, you know, so on. You know. All these are supposed to be mysteries, you know, but actually it's because, or transpersonal phenomena altogether, transmutation, or reincarnation after death experiences. All these phenomena, the information is there. It's just not easy to access it or to make it manifest, or make it available to our everyday, old-fashioned, conventional consciousness. That's the problem. I think we are all informed all the time in every way.
So we are happy to continue?
Sure, go ahead.